How do you go from starting a blog with no audience to writing funny Facebook posts to writing not one, not two, but 3 books and becoming a Sunday Times best-selling author? Listen to this episode to find out.
Welcome to the Content 10X Podcast, the show where content creators learn how to harness the power of content repurposing. And now, your host, Amy Woods.
Hello and welcome to the Content 10X Podcast. I'm your host, Amy Woods, and today I'm sharing another instalment of our It Started With Content case study series. Would you like to hear about how a one-woman mission to shine a light on the reality of parenting led to 4 book deals and the Sunday Times bestseller list? Welcome to another instalment of our It Started With Content case study series. Now, in these monthly episodes, I share real-life examples of just how powerful content can be. Now, I've already talked about how content can take you from being virtually unknown to a worldwide star in my episode about Joe Wicks. And I've also shared how a fresh take on an underperforming piece of content can skyrocket it to success in the episode all about the comedy podcast My Dad Wrote a Porno. Now, both were great examples of starting at the start with content with no audience and no big master plan and growing it to become something so much bigger, perhaps a lot bigger than they ever expected. So I've spoken before about not knowing where your content journey will take you, and I believe that nobody quite embodies just how content can change your life than Sarah Turner. Now, you might not recognise the name, but some of you will definitely know her by her online alias, the Unmumsy Mum. Now, Sarah's brand includes social media channels, a blog, books, and so much more, providing funny and, in fact, most of the time, hilarious content to hundreds of thousands of her followers online. And she's built such a loyal audience and strong community, and it's all grown from her content. So let me give you some context. In a previous life, Sarah worked in finance, but when she had her first child, she realised that she didn't want to continue her current job alongside her new lifestyle and parenting responsibilities, so she took a part-time job at a university. And she wasn't dreaming of becoming a content creator or starting a blog as a side hustle. I can only imagine with a new job and new baby, content creation was furthest from her mind. But when her first child, Henry, was a year old, Sarah was faced with many of the challenges that mums know all too well, and she turned to the internet looking for reassurance about the less glamorous realities of parenthood, but she struggled to find anything that she could relate to. What Sarah found instead was a glossy presentation of parenthood, idealistic images and content that Sarah simply just couldn't relate to, and if anything, it actually made her feel worse. Knowing that she couldn't possibly be alone and completely frustrated with all of the parenting content she found online, she decided to start her own blog. And Sarah went to good old Google and typed in how to start a blog, and the Unmumsy Mum was born, because before she knew it, she typed out and published her first blog post. She had no readers or followers, started at the start like we all do, and for Sarah this was a way of just getting her thoughts out there, a bit like journaling, pretty much like a form of therapy. But I don't know if she realised just how clever she was to start creating the content that she was looking for, because she wasn't the only mum craving content about the true realities of parenthood, the good, the bad and the ugly. Now, this is something that we see all the time with entrepreneurs. They want a product or service but find that it doesn't exist, so they make it their mission to create it. It can be such a successful business strategy, because if you want something, there's a huge chance that other people do too, and Sarah filled that gap with content. So she continued her blog and she set up a Twitter account to continue venting her frustrations, realities and sharing hilarious, unglamorous moments of parenthood that so many are afraid to share. Sarah's Twitter account ticked over for 18 months or so without a lot of traction, and then she started a Facebook page, and then all of a sudden her followers jumped to more than 200,000. Now, I find this part of Sarah's story really interesting, because up until Sarah started posting on Facebook, she had no idea how successful her content could be. And this is why it's so important to be on a multitude of platforms if you want to get known, because what works for you on Instagram might not work for you on LinkedIn and so on. And for Sarah, her content wasn't getting masses of engagement and traction on Twitter, but when she took it to Facebook, people went wild. So that's where it struck a chord, and that's where she's most popular today. So I say this all the time, you must figure out where your audience are. It's not about being everywhere, it's about being where your audience are. Hey, just a little break from this week's episode to let you know about becoming a Content 10x Insider. If you want more content repurposing tips and advice, then why not join hundreds of business owners, marketers and content creators who get them delivered straight to their inbox once a week by subscribing to the Content 10x newsletter. As well as tips and advice, you get industry updates, inspiring stories, exclusive content, offers and more. You can subscribe at content10x.com/newsletter and there's a link in the show notes too. Okay, back to this week's episode. Now, Sarah started her blog in 2013 and her Facebook page a year later, and today it has nearly 800,000 followers and her content frequently goes viral. Her videos get six-figure views, some go well into the millions, and they aren't polished and perfect videos by any stretch of the imagination. They're simply behind-the-scenes snippets from her life, videos of her children doing funny things or her sharing a story about some crazy moment that happened that day. And it all furthers that community feel. Sarah curates content. She reshares videos as if it's dropping them in a WhatsApp group with friends. So for Sarah, the social platforms are extremely that, just a place to be sociable. And you'll hear me talk a lot about how we need short form content to lead to long form content. So Sarah's popularity on Facebook, of course, has led to a huge rise in readers of her blog posts. And then the pivotal moment that changed Sarah's life forever came the day an editorial director of a publishing company got in touch. They'd seen her social media, they'd read her blog posts and offered her a book deal. Now, without her online content, Sarah would never have been called up out of the blue with this book deal. And she had an opportunity to then continue her content journey and see how it could keep changing her life and the lives of others. So not only did she say yes to the book deal, but she quit her job too. So a very, very brave move. Now, this all happened in 2015, just 2 years after she typed into Google how to start a blog. In February 2016, the Unmumsy Mum was no longer just a blog, it was now a published book, and what's more, it shot to the top of the Sunday Times bestseller list, one of the most respected book charts in the UK. And what followed was another 2 book deals. The Unmumsy Mum Diary was published a year later, and in 2019, Sarah returned with the Unmumsy Mum A to Z, an inexpert guide to parenting. And at the time of recording this show, she's actually writing her 4th book, and her books have been translated into more than 15 different languages and are sold all over the world. Now, since Sarah first started creating content, she's achieved so many incredible things. The most notable is establishing such a strong community through her social channels, but also finding a niche and owning it. And Sarah's never held back about the realities of parenting. I think it's her honesty that people really, really relate to. She's as genuine as they come, and that's why I believe she's been just so successful. But what are Sarah's thoughts on her content success? In an interview with Grow, she said, "If I'm honest, I'd never planned for any of it. It was just a sideline, a hobby. I certainly didn't have plans for it to become my career." So what can we take away from Sarah's story? Firstly, I think that one of the key reasons Sarah's content is so successful is down to its relatability. Her authenticity sets her apart from other creators and has created a community where others can really share their genuine feelings. Secondly, her talent. She's fantastic at what she does. She's a great writer, extremely funny, and she's managed to go all in on something that she is brilliant at. Third, her consistency. You hear me talk about this a lot, but she started at 0 and never gave up. She was consistently creating content long before it took off and continued to do so when it did as well. Fourth, she saw a gap, she saw a problem of a whole genre of content that seemed to be missing, and she filled it. Fifth, passion and purpose. In particular, Sarah was passionate about sharing some real talk about parenting, and she was purposeful. She knew that she was helping others. She gets thousands of messages from grateful parents all over the world who really appreciate her content. And sixth, the different channels and finding her people. She's on social media and she has the blog, and she found the right channels for her audience, and she has different types of content for different platforms. So being platform specific with your content, just the perfect content marketing approach. So if anything is holding you back from getting started with creating content, please take some inspiration from Sarah Turner and her It Started With Content story and go write that blog post. Thank you so much for listening to this week's podcast episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. Now please do subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And do let me know if you're enjoying this new case study series by leaving a rating and review wherever you're listening to this podcast. If you want to get weekly repurposing tips and advice delivered to your inbox, then head to content10x.com/newsletter and become a Content 10x insider. And if you haven't already done so, then do check out my book as well. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble and more. And finally, don't forget to follow me on social media. I'm at Content 10x on all the social media platforms. So all that's left to say is thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next episode.